Morning Talk on SAFM.
Once again, good morning to you and thank you for joining us. My name is Nayelu Pondor. Now we get down to the nub of our conversation, the issue of smoking, smokers and smoking regulations in the Republic of South Africa. Already we have a situation where smokers have been restricted to certain areas for their liberty to be practiced. So we need to understand exactly what is this all about. And now we were supposed to be getting this perspective from the department. We do not have that perspective. So please understand, as best as we could, we tried to afford you both perspectives. But we do have Leon Lowe, who will be giving us his perspective as the Executive Director at the Free Market Foundation. Good morning to you, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you. Good morning.
Yes, lovely. First and foremost, let's talk about smoking as a liberty. Is this not an infringement?
Well, let me make this clear. This can be very confusing if you oppose the anti-smoking regulation. It is often said, actually, by the people who propose these regulations that there should be a balance, a trade-off between the interests of smokers and non-smokers. First point about that is, of course, many non-smokers are perfectly happy to be in the presence of smokers, so this needs to be understood very clearly as an anti-smoker regulation, not anti-smoking, but it's targeted at certain people. Secondly, and more importantly, there should be no trade-off. You don't, for example, have a trade-off of rights between the right to have sex and the right not to be raped. Both are absolute. The rights of smokers should be absolute. They should be free to smoke. And the rights of non- or anti-smokers should be absolute. Nobody should be allowed to impose a nuisance on you or impose their smoke on you. Let's get that clear so that we are for a more rigid protection of non-smokers than the Department of Health, not less. We don't want any trade-off, like we don't want a trade-off between rapists and victims.
Then how do we balance it in the context of
smoking? There's no balance. It's absolute. In other words, you are free to smoke wherever you like, as much as you like, provided you do not interfere with me. So as long as it's a good old-fashioned thing in law called nuisance law.
That's a bit facetious. If you're saying you're free to smoke wherever you want,
yes.
If then wherever I want is next to you, then why?
No, but then you're being a nuisance. In the same way that you can't make a loud noise next to me,
so
or you can't let out an obnoxious smell or whatever. In other words, the law is very, very simple. You may not be a nuisance, full stop. With whether it's with tobacco, noise, whatever, you may not punch me, you may not bump me, you may not obstruct me. The law should be absolute regarding my right not to be imposed upon by you. Beyond that, you should be free. You should be free to do, as I would like to say, I'd like to privatize your mouth. I would like you to control your mouth. You alone must decide what goes into it. Free speech is your right to decide what goes out of it.
Theoretically, that is what's happening. Now, the department is planning on making sure that people are healthier than they were before the legislation or the regulations were conceptualized. Do you have any disagreements with the concept?
Very strong disagreement. According to the Department of Health, by far the biggest killer in South Africa is HIV/AIDS. Long before it starts telling people how and where to smoke, it starts telling how and where to have sex. It should have graphic warnings on, either at least condoms or on, I heard one crude proposal that we should actually have health warnings on all penises. So the point is that...
It's a bit hyperbolic, isn't it?
No, but the point, it's a very important principle,
okay,
is it's not the Departments of Health's job to interfere with lifestyle choice. In other words, whether you drink, whether you're obese, whether you eat junk food, whether you have too much salt, more. But they, by the way, are planning to regulate how much salt you can have in your food. That's already been published, a draft regulation. So they're going to even regulate the flavor of your food for your health. Now, as C.S. Lewis put it,
that's not the hyperbole right there. No, they're talking about foods that are going to be brought in already packaged, things that you're supposed to be given without your contribution to it.
Yes. So the point is that if I prefer a particular flavor, a particular brand, they are saying, no, that brand now can't appeal to me by having more salt or more sugar or more anything else. Yes.
They're not stopping you from adding the salt, but we digress. The point you're making here is...
The point is the Department of Health is telling you how to live your lifestyle. Now, once you accept that principle, you must never stop and complain when it transgresses something that you care about. For example, in some communist countries and in fascist countries, we have had compulsory exercise. In New York, for example, they now ban the sale of large cold drinks. In London, there's a proposal to ban the sale of sweets to fat children. Now, can you imagine a shopkeeper, a cafe owner, looks at two kids and says, sorry, you can't buy that chocolate bar, you're too fat. Can you imagine what psychological damage that will do? Now, the point is that once you accept the principle of your lifestyle being regulated because someone else thinks you're making bad lifestyle choices, then you have no objection regardless of what that regulation is. In other words, it's a matter of principle. The principle is, should you determine your own health and not someone else, being the government? You don't belong to the government.
But the principle you're laying out seems to carry a subtext to it that suggests that the policy by itself is inherently depriving you of your liberties.
Well, yes, and you could have a policy that doesn't, a policy that educates, that warns, that provides support services. That would be a respectful policy that respects the dignity of civilians.
Said that we don't have the department to be with us, but is the intention not to protect those who are not smoking?
No, because the point is this goes way beyond that. You see,
so you do accept that at some point there is the intention to protect the non-smokers?
Yes, and I'm in favour of that. Totally. Absolute. There should be complete protection of non-smokers.
Where do they overstep their bounds?
When they start telling you may not smoke where there is no non-smoker. For example, if you work alone or only with smokers, or you go to a club, a restaurant, for example, that allows smokers, you don't have to go there. It should be possible to have a restaurant for smokers only, or a theatre, or a club. Now, for example, I went to a place in Melville recently. I went late at night because that was the only place I could find that was open to have some coffee. And it turned out that everyone there smokes. Now, it was very unpleasant for me because I'm a lifelong non-smoker and I dislike smoking intensely, personally. All it means is I'll never go there again, but I perfectly protect their right to be like that.
Yes.
And it's not my right to go to that restaurant, and it's not my right or the government's right to tell the people in that restaurant they may not smoke.
Now, if the people at the restaurant, you're using your example, say everyone is welcome, the smoker and the non-smoker, is it not obligatory for them to provide for both smokers and non-smokers?
That's what the current law says. Yes, that's what the current law says. And that law, although I think even that goes too far, but let's say that's not really a problem. Many places, including this building we're in right now, has a place for smokers.
Okay.
The plan now is to ban that.
Okay.
In other words, out of this large SABC complex, the plan is to force all SABC employees who smoke and guests and visitors to walk outside onto the pavement. Now, understand this. You will have a cluster of many smokers there. At the moment, people like me are protected because they're in some ventilated smoking section. In future, as I walk down the sidewalk, I will be forced to walk through other people's smoke. So
but
the law will
actually already.
But the law will impose tobacco smoke on non-smokers. The opposite of what the law previously did was to protect people.
You're using an example where that will already be. It's already happening. You meet people in the street smoking, and you're exposed to their secondhand smoke.
Yes, and I think that shouldn't be the case. I think that's wrong.
Then how do we manage that situation?
We allow free smoking areas indoors where people are happy to smoke or it's ventilated.
All right, we're going to open the lines.
That's the way to protect us.
0891 104 207, 0891 104 207. The lines are open if you'd like to join the conversation. You're a smoker or a non-smoker. Feel free to call us and joining the conversation. We are neither for or against here at SAFM. We do have Leon Lowe, who's going to be giving the perspective of the Free Market Foundation, liberties to be protected, and we were scheduled, I want to repeat this, to speak to Precious Matsoso, who's the Director General of the National Department of Health. So don't feel like the department has not been given the opportunity to speak. They have been. However, they chose not to come because the DG is flying. But they're still welcome should they choose to come and join. They're still welcome to come in and join the conversation. 0891 104 207. Let's go to the lines. Is it Ivo in Neisner? Is it Ivo or Ivo?
That's right. Hi there, Maya.
Yes, good morning, Ivo.
And hello, Leon.
Hello.
Hi, this is Ivo speaking.
Yes, hi, Ivo.
You make very good points in principle about the rights of both smokers and non-smokers. One of the issues that was of a great concern to me when I started looking at the latest smoking regulations is that not only that they go beyond what the law already seeks to achieve, which is just to protect non-smokers, but the possible commercial impact of that on employment, on businesses. I know restaurants and pubs where they do allow smoking in one section, and frankly, a lot of them would go under without, if they told smokers to listen, go buy your beer and drink at home, which frankly smokers would do.
Yes, this has happened in countries like Ireland, where it has already been banned indoors, and other places. And what has happened is a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, have gone under, because what people do is they stay home more. And and then the paradox of that is that the smoking is then imposed on domestic workers and children who really can't defend themselves. So it's completely counterproductive. And in Russia, for example, their Department of Trade and Industry did some research and concluded that over 10,000 businesses would close, and many thousands of jobs, I think it was something like 500,000 jobs, would be lost. They therefore persuaded their Department of Health not to impose an indoor smoking ban because of the impact it would have on the economy. So that's the one government department pointing out to the other that the measure would be completely counterproductive.
Because I think that goes for workplaces as well. You've already got the situation where people have to leave their offices to go and smoke. And that never is a 5-minute smoke. It's always a 15-minute smoke. And it always ends up involving non-smokers who end up going outside for a chat. So you already start losing a lot of productivity.
It'll be a lot worse under the proposal, because here in the SABC, for example, a tall high-rise building with thousands of people, they would have to not just walk down the passage to the smoking room, which is properly ventilated and separated. They will have to go down the elevators, through the parking lot, out into the streets where hundreds of people would be gathering smoking. The productive time of work wasted is actually quite staggering.
Yeah. I can see what's going to happen, though. Companies are going to start imposing rules on their employees in their contracts that says, look, if you want to have a cigarette during your lunch break, fine, but you're not allowed to smoke between when you arrive at work and your lunch break. Yes,
and that will cause anxiety, it will cause conflict, it will have all sorts of psychological implications.
But we cannot know that, Leon. Well, thank you very much. Got to move on. We cannot know the reaction of the people. We've heard a lot of people preempting what's going to be happening, but we cannot know what is going to happen.
Well, there is some. There is some evidence. For example, the Airline Pilots Association has already said that the prohibition of smoking on long-haul flights should be reconsidered because of the psychological impact, stress, conflict, aggression, tension of smokers, and they've called for consideration of reintroducing smoking and non-smoking areas on planes. Now, let me immediately say there that here, I personally, as a non-smoker, if you're sitting near the non-smoking section on old flights, it was very unpleasant. So that's a debatable one. But the point that you're raising is the psychology. And the Pilots Association, it says that it's had a very negative effect on the relationship between cabin crew and passengers. The smokers who can't smoke for long periods become aggressive, they become highly stressed, they start fighting with passengers around them and with cabin crew.
Even that situation you've just cited is circumstantial. Let's move on. Matthew Now, Matthewson, good morning.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. I mean, no one's on the program articulating the fact there are such a thing called nicotine patches that, beyond some of the problems that we just discussed. I mean, I'm from Scotland, and in my country we had all of this many years ago, and now there's a complete ban of smoking indoors in restaurants and in pubs. The weather's atrocious in Scotland, and actually it's not the end of the world. I mean, people go to nightclubs now and you can go and have a nice time and come out without stinking of smoke. It's not the end of the world, but at the same time people are still allowed to smoke freely outdoors where they want, and I think it's worked quite well, and it has had an impact a little bit on the pubs and clubs that have seen a little bit of diminishment of income.
Isn't the point there, Matthewson, that people should not be forced to use nicotine patches?
Well, no, I mean, I just think, if we're talking about long-haul flights, there is such a thing as a nicotine patch, or there's electronic cigarettes that you can use, that if people are that desperate and they have to resort to that, then there are things out there that can combat that.
All right. Now I'll give Leon an opportunity to respond to that. Thank you very much, Matthew. Matthewson. Alec in Johannesburg. Good morning, Alec.
Good morning to you and your guest, Mr. Lowe. I think that I'm finding it a bit difficult to follow the Free Market Foundation's credentials and principles here. First of all, I don't recall ever having heard the Free Market Foundation stand up and say that the corrupt bankers should have gone to the wall as free market principles would have necessitated. They were quite happy for government intervention to save businesses. So it seems that there seems to be a bit of a skewness in the underlying philosophy and principles of this foundation. And I just keep hearing an argument against the government and against the government's interference in the rights of businesses, as opposed to the greater public interest, which is government's actual role, is to protect the community at large and not the narrow vested interests of individuals and or very narrow section of the population. We know for a fact that smoking is bad for people's health. And here we have someone arguing to allow that in almost a convoluted way, in a fallacious way, and I use the word fallacious in the context of logic. And that's what I'm battling to follow in this discussion, is really where and how does the Free Market Foundation justify its position within those contexts. And perhaps Mr. Lowe must speak to that, is that when it suits business, they're happy for government intervention, but when it doesn't suit them and they perpetuate an evil that is scientifically proven to affect the health and well-being of the general populace.
Help me understand there, Alec, before we move on. Are you trying to say that people who share a different opinion to you should not share those opinions on air?
No. But I'm saying they mustn't come from the proposition of being a free market participant.
But what if that's their apprehension of Free Market Foundation?
I beg your pardon?
What if that is what the Free Market Foundation should be all about? What if that's how?
Well, I'm not sure that the Free Market Foundation is perpetuating the concept of free market here, because the government is a very necessary functionary, even within the capitalistic system, for the functioning of the market. So I don't believe that the definition of free market means that government may not interfere in the mechanisms, because we know that laissez-faire market mechanisms are not efficient.
We'll have a response. Thank you very much, Alec.
And therefore not in the interest. And businesses benefit from government involvement. And what I'm saying is that I thus cannot understand the tenure of Mr. Lowe's position on this matter, other than being anti-government within the South African context.
All right, we'll have him respond to the. Thank you very much, Alec. We'll take your calls after the news headlines with Carmen Reddy. Right now, we continue taking your calls on 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207, in conversation with Leon Lowe, Executive Director of the Free Market at the Free Market Foundation, talking to us about the new regulations that are to be passed on the smokers or smoking, whichever it is that you feel is most lucrative for you, most relevant for you. 0891 104 207. You could send your text messages to 34701. Let's go to Mohammed in Durban. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning. I just like to make a comment. I just think our attitude towards smoking is more of a negative or apologetic nature. The reason I'm saying that is because, just firstly, you call a smoker, and you call someone who doesn't smoke a non-smoker. You're trying to indicate that there's a negative connotation to a person who doesn't smoke, as a non-smoker, like a black and a non-black, or white and a non-white. So what I'm saying is our attitude towards smoking, I think, is totally off, and I think there should be more stringent, laws in place to curb this addiction, I would say. I just think that government isn't doing enough.
I'm sorry, which is the addiction, the smoking or the calling it?
Sorry?
Which is the addiction, the smoking or the way of calling it? What are you saying we should rehabilitate?
I'm saying that our attitude towards the smoking, like you call a smoker as if he.
I understand that point. You said we need to rehabilitate
life. He's got a different type of lifestyle, so it's not something negative to him. But you're calling a smoker a non-smoker, meaning there's a negative connotation to a person who doesn't smoke. So you're trying to say that a non-smoker is someone who's doing something wrong in inverted commas, so to say. My point is that the government, those people in power who are trying to deal with this, are smokers. So it makes it extremely difficult on them to pass legislature curbing smoking. That's the problem with trying to rid this country of this type of addiction.
All right, thank you very much, Mohammed. Perhaps not too difficult because they're putting together some regulations already. Leon, you have a lot of people coming up against you.
Yes, well, Alec, firstly, I don't know what he's been looking at, but there are over 100 free market institutes around the world, and I think he could visit any one of their websites and he would see that all of them, as I think it's safe to predict, are against bailouts of companies by governments. So it's just simply wrong about that. On the contrary, the whole idea that we should use taxpayers' money to bail out companies is what we call welfare for the well-to-do. This is taking money from the poor and funding the rich.
Not economic recovery.
Yes, well, stimulus is a slightly separate thing from bailouts, but nonetheless, I think most of us are also very dubious about so-called stimulus packages. And we have Obama, for example, who has inherited George Bush's stimulus package, and many of us say, even though we might like Obama, that one of the things he shouldn't have done is simply perpetuated Bush's policies of bailouts and stimulus. But that's another matter. So he's simply wrong about that. He's also completely wrong to say that I am somehow anti the South African government. This is quite untrue. It shouldn't be relevant for me to say this, but I used to be a courier for the ANC. I have a long history with the struggle and anti-apartheid movement, and I have very good relationships with many people within the government. So that's simply also just wrong. He does say that the government should ban smoking because it's bad. Well, so is unprotected sex bad. So is extramarital sex bad. So is salt bad. So is junk food bad. So is obesity bad. So is people who don't exercise bad. So is liquor bad. So is driving cars bad. It's one of the biggest sources of carnage. Drunk walking is bad. In fact, most road carnage is not in cars. It's cyclists and pedestrians who are drunk. So liquor-related accidents, often you think of these are people in cars. It's not. It's people outside cars. So does he say that if you decide something is bad, that you then have an excuse to prohibit or regulate it? And the answer, if you believe in any sort of free society at all, then that's not the basis on which you curb freedom. Freedom is something where you say to people that if I think what you're doing is a bad idea, for example, unprotected sex, I advise you to use a condom. I can't force you to use a condom. Or premarital or extramarital, or, for example, if we're going to have graphic health warnings, pictures of diseased lungs on tobacco products, then we must have pictures of mangled bodies on motor cars. And we must have pictures on diseased livers on liquor bottles, and glasses, wine glasses in restaurants. If you take the logic of this argument to its logical conclusion, we then simply live in a totally despotic society in which obesity, for example, by far the biggest health risk is obesity. Should we ban obesity? Make it illegal to have a certain weight? And that's the logic of what Alec is saying, is if you're saying merely establishing scientifically that something is bad for you justifies removing your liberty, well, then just go and, I don't know where you should live, in Mongolia or somewhere.
Perhaps the nub of what he was talking about is the integrity of the foundation. Seems to be free market minded, and in some cases not so free market.
No, we are the one thing you can't accuse us of is inconsistency. We are consistent, often at great cost to ourselves.
That's what it was challenging.
Yeah. No, right. Well, he won't find anything. He can visit our website. If he finds any inconsistency there at all, for example, on this thing of the bankers and corruption, we are no more in favor of business than we are of labor. Business isn't some kind of special affection of ours. We do not speak for business. We do not represent business. We do not want the government to help business. On the contrary, a central thing about free marketeers is we want bad businesses to go under. We want corrupt business people to be prosecuted and jailed. The idea that we somehow like business.
That sounds like Mitt Romney.
It sounds like Obama. It sounds like Obama too.
He's the one. He's the one who wrote an article and said, "Let GM go down." I want to take some more calls from you. 0891-104-207. 0891-104-207. Let's go to Paul Tandukolo. Good morning.
Morning, Naya. You're speaking to Tandukolo here from Paul.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, Naya, man, I've been listening. I've been following this tobacco story with interest. And there are a lot of things that one would love to ask from the department. It's a pity that the department is
Indeed,
not there.
It's a great pity. We would have loved to hear their perspective. Go ahead.
And one of them is that, when they want to ban the smoking areas, the question that automatically comes out is that when the smokers are in the smoking area, whom are they posing danger to? Because they went there, they smoked there, knowingly very well what are the dangers of smoking. They're fully aware of what is happening there. You know, they've got all other regulations that they've came up with before, like the regulations on something like it's a ignition propensity thing, that they say that the cigarette they will minimize cell fires and some unwanted fires. And you ask yourself as to how many fires that have ever been caused by cigarette. Have they made, you know, a research to say many fires have been caused by so much cigarettes? And now they've recently published a regulation around a display, you know, which has been published for the second time, in fact. And interestingly, they're saying that now it must be reduced to be one display place with one cigarette type per each, and, you know, over 100 cigarette types to be displayed. And my question would be, how would this happen in a pub? Because a pub is a age-regulated area. How do you do that?
Right.
Because there you don't have minors, because I assume that they want to prevent minors to see the cigarette products. But they've got adults that are going to pubs, you've got adults that are going to, you know, to liquor outlets, whom they want to do these things to.
Got it.
So these are the problems that we're having.
Yes.
You have people that really, they just want to regulate for the sake of regulating.
Yeah.
You see, that's the department.
Thank you
Why
very
are
much,
they doing this thing? Do they have the research? Have they made the education? Because education should be the key.
Got it, Tanklo. I have to move on. Tanklo. Thank you very much for your point. I hope the department is listening and they will pitch in any time. You're still welcome. We still have 15 minutes. Let's move on to Amrat in Cape Town. Amrat,
good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead, sir.
And good morning to your guest, right? Now, I am a completely blind person, right? And I'm also unemployed, right? Now, I stopped drinking in 1981, right? I stopped drinking in 1981 and I stopped smoking in 1996, right? Now, the poor people, they should be educated about these things, right? Because they will benefit a lot if they stop drinking and smoking, especially financial-wise and also health-wise, because they will benefit by health-wise and also financial-wise, because I have got money now in my pocket. When I was drinking and smoking, I did not have money in my pocket. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Amrat. Let's move on to Steve in Cape Town. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you both. I should be amused at Leon's propaganda, but I'm appalled because he's a serious player in South African society in terms of his views on free market, which have some merit, but they've been excessively deregulated to the extent that we've had the problems we have. But he's not being intellectually honest, because you can't skate over the question that was raised earlier of the greater good, and you can't be biased in terms of the tobacco industry to the extent that he ignores the health effects and cost to society in an economic sense. And then on top of the economic costs, which are massive, it's complete specious argument to compare it with obesity and such. There's a line between a substance that is harmful, directly harmful, and then to slew in and bring in alcohol. We're talking about tobacco, and we can't fix all society's problems at once. But we certainly can't argue this way, that if one thing is bad for you, another thing that's bad for you should be allowed under the radar. It's illogical, and I submit very seriously, Leon, you're being intellectually dishonest. And to the extent that you have a fine intellect, I'm appalled by this.
Tell me,
it's
Steve.
It's unethical the way you're arguing. It's silly.
Steve?
And I think that we need to ask you, who's funding this effort of yours? Is it BAT? I'll listen on air.
Hold on, before you go, Steve, I'd love to ask you a question. You're saying that he should not be bashing alcohol. Are you suggesting, medically speaking, that alcohol has no negative impact in your body?
That's not the point. Alcohol is extremely damaging. And there are regulations that cover its sale, its distribution, its use, and its abuse. But to bring it in to justify or to criticize steps being taken for the first time seriously against tobacco is just purely illogical. And it's against the science, as many people have pointed out.
Could you point out the illogical part there, Steve?
Billions.
Steve, just point out the illogical part.
It's not good reasoning to say that because thieving happens a lot, murder should be okay, or we shouldn't interfere with murder. It's that type of reasoning. We are talking about the harm of one particular issue in society. To drag in the other and say, well, because people drink and cause accidents, why should we be looking at smoking? It's actually puerile.
All right.
Nobody argues like that if they're being serious.
All right, here, Steve. Thank you
That's
very much.
why I accuse him of intellectual dishonesty.
All right, he'll respond. Thank you very much, Steve. Let's move on to Port Elizabeth. Kelly, good morning.
Hello, good morning. I've been trying for ages to get SAFM to do a program on smoking, but a different program, and nobody seems interested. Of course, SAFM is just politics and ANC nowadays anyway.
Like we're talking politics and ANC right now, Kelly.
But you know, with children, if you say to them to not do something, that is when they want to do it. If you say to them why they shouldn't do it, we all know the disadvantages of smoking, the cost, the health, the absolute waste of money, everything. I've been wondering if, like Siki has an open line on a Wednesday, if you didn't do a program one day a week of an hour, or see how it goes for half an hour, where people who have actually stopped smoking, because and those who want to, and let callers phone in how they stopped, when they stopped, what prompted them to stop at the time, and people who are trying to stop, because there's nothing like that.
All right, Kelly, in the future, and anyone else like Kelly, if you have a suggestion, give it to the producers. The person who answers your phone, talk to the producers. But right now we're focusing on something totally different, Kelly.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. Leon?
Yes, three responses I want to make. One is to Tanda, and I absolutely agree with him. I want to point out that people who are work with smaller business, for example, Lawrence Mavundla, the president of NAFCOC and the Black Business Caucus, he has come out pointing out that in informal and small businesses, these regulations are disproportionately negative, not just for them, but also their customers. It's impractical, for example, in shebeens and taverns and spaza shops and for street vendors. And Tanda is absolutely right. This is, in fact, an elitist measure. It has in its mind rich people in high-income areas. It's completely unpractical and unworkable in low-income areas, where, for example, going 10 meters from an entrance is in front of another entrance. You can only have such a law if what you're thinking about is very rich people with lots of space.
Fair point. Does that not also say health, therefore, is elitist?
No. Then the next caller, Amrad, made the point, the person who said he has no vision and is unemployed. And he stressed the correct thing, which is education. Teach people. That's what you should do about lifestyle and health. And I, like him, neither drink nor smoke. So we have at least that in common. According to Steve, I'm also blind, though. And
intellectually.
Intellectually, yes. Now, let's just deal with Steve's point. Firstly, he uses a lot of ad hominem personal statements. One of them is the implication that I might somehow be a front for the tobacco industry. I got my staff to let me know. I had no idea, by the way, how much of our money came from the tobacco industry over the years, less than 2%. If anything, I should resent the fact that I'm here on your program talking about it and they haven't enriched us. I can assure you we in the Free Market Foundation do not care a darn about who funds us. We care about principles, we care about people, we care about freedom. And so when he talks about the greater good, he still does not address the issue. If you think it's fair to restrict your freedom for the greater good, then on what principle do you stop when it comes to other things that are bad for you? And I've mentioned a whole lot. I don't want to repeat them.
But you're missing his point there. His point is when we're saying we're trying to correct a wrong, why is it that you'll say there are many other wrongs? Let us not correct this one. Let's let all fly.
If you violate one right, then you have condoned the violation of all other rights. In other words, once you sacrifice the principle, you must never come back later and say, no, but we want freedom for alcohol and we want freedom for...
So why do we even have parliament there, Leon? Because the idea of parliament is to put together legislation that will regulate things that need to be regulated.
Yes, exactly. And freedom, lifestyle choice, is not one of those things. Which, let me go back to the biggest killer, according to the Department of Health.
But
HIV,
hold on.
AIDS.
You keep on calling it a lifestyle choice, and yet this lifestyle choice is imposing on the health of the other.
No. I did stress, and I want to stress again, it should never impose on the life of another. Now, liquor, for example, does that because it causes abuse and violence and bad driving and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean you should ban liquor. It doesn't mean you should restrict the rights of people to drink. You should protect people from the violation of their rights by others. That's what the government's there to do.
Again, that's another convoluted point there. You're suggesting that
not to protect you from your own stupidity.
And this is exactly the point that you just made right now. You cannot say it is liquor that does these things. It is the people who are under the influence of liquor.
That's correct.
So there are people who are under the influence of liquor who don't commit such atrocities.
Correct. That is why you should protect people from the violation of their rights by others, not impose on people's freedom of lifestyle choice. In other words, you should be protected from me.
But you're avoiding his point there, Leon. It's not just a lifestyle choice. It is an inhibitor of somebody else's health.
No, he raised it. I want to say that now for the third time. You should never be allowed to inhibit someone else's health. Full stop. Okay, we want 100% protection of people who don't want to be exposed to someone else's tobacco smoke, bad driving, assault, loud noise, whatever. We should protect people from each other.
And this is what the regulation is trying to do?
No, the regulation isn't. The regulation is saying when you are by yourself, you, for example, may not serve liquor to, you may not serve refreshments to smokers. So these are smokers by themselves. They're not imposing on anyone, and the law says whether or not they may have refreshments. Now, let me just go to this issue of cost, because this has to be dealt with. Steve raised this issue, and it's a completely spurious issue. Okay. The revenue collected from tobacco far exceeds what the government spends on tobacco-related illnesses. Equally, the revenue collected from liquor exceeds the expenditure of health department on looking after people who've got liquor-related concerns. So liquor and tobacco and other, for example, junk food, are contributors to revenue. Now, there's another way in which, by the way, smoking benefits us all, non-smokers, and that is if what they say is true. Let's assume they haven't exaggerated the claims, which this probably has, and I invite people to look this up on the internet. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to express a personal view, but there's a very clear and obvious debate as to whether the claims against smoking have actually been exaggerated scientifically. Now, let's assume the worst is true. Then it means smokers die younger, which means they save us healthcare bills in old age, they save us pensions, they save us welfare expenditure. So if they die younger, we should be thankful to them for doing so.
Now, bring in the cost issue. Perhaps the other side of the coin is that these people who are contributing to the economy, when they die younger, they effectively cost the economy.
No, not in their old age. No. The smokers are meant to live something like 4 to 7 years shorter. So in other words, instead of dying well into their retirement, they die early in their retirement.
And effectively, they don't contribute as they should to the economy.
No, when they've retired, they drain on the economy. They no longer contribute.
But if they die early, they don't contribute. They don't. Their brains don't come in and help out.
Yeah, but you're assuming that retired people are contributing. I'm not making the case for retired people to die young. All I'm saying is that if you want to raise the cost argument, then take it to its logical conclusion. And the fact is that however you look at it, revenue collection, healthcare expenditure, welfare expenditure, smokers are a net contributor. They subsidize non-smokers, people like me.
What it's called, syntax? Hold that thought.
Fun tax is, I think, what you mean.
Let's take a break and come back. We'll read your text messages.
Morning Talk on SAFM.
Because we don't have the word from the Department of Health, we'll give Leon. It was supposed to be the last word, but it's going to be the only word because the department never pitched. Leon?
Well, let me firstly, in favour of the department, say I do believe they are in good faith. I do believe they mean well, and I do believe they really want to contribute to public health. So let me say I am completely on their side on that. They do want to protect non-smokers. I'm even more in favour of that than they are. I think the issue between us is what is a legitimate way of pursuing their objectives of promoting public health. There are legitimate and illegitimate ways, and that's the debate we want to have, not their objectives, not their good faith. They are in good faith, and we are in good faith.
Thank you very much, Leon Lowe, the Executive Director at the Free Market Foundation. Thank you very much for coming through and talking to us.
Nice to be with you.
Is smoke from cigarettes worse than direct briar smoke? That's Ronald Naya. If your liberty kills others, that is unfair for the other party. It is good that government is doing. Abolish smoking in all public places. Andrew in Guguletu. Smoking and the whole tobacco industry should have been banned a long time ago. Absolutely no justification whatsoever. It's Brian Polugwanaya. Mr. Lowe is ignorant. The Debt of Health has the right to regulate, or the Department of Health has the right to regulate salt content and tobacco use, because Health Department picks up the tab to treat people. That's Yogi in Cape Town. It's not the smoking that worries me as much the drinking. My son was killed by a drunk driver. That's Emma. Got it. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the news. Very much. 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 Move on to the news.